When people are in business for themselves or independent contractors, they often travel away from home for business. To determine the types of travel, accommodation, transportation, and living expenses that can be deducted from business income, we have to define the concept of away from home, and thus what home means for tax purposes. I'm the Tax Geek, and here is the concept of tax home oversimplified. I touched on the concept of tax home in an earlier video on deducting meal expenses, but this video will dive a bit deeper into the subject. Time for a quick true-false quiz. True or false, the location of your tax home is always your primary residence. If you picked false, you won this round. Also, before we start, this video applies almost exclusively to people who are in business for themselves. If you are a W-2 employee and incur out-of-pocket unreimbursed business travel expenses or any sort of business expenses, you are out of luck when it comes to deducting them from your income. Those deductions were suspended by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which took effect in 2018, the effects of which run through 2025. Determining whether business travel is considered to be local, away from home, or even business travel at all depends on where your tax home is located. In the eyes of the IRS, your tax home isn't necessarily where you are primarily domiciled. Your tax home, according to the IRS, is the location where you conduct most of your income-producing activities, regardless of where you actually live. Here are some examples that might clarify things. Jeannine is a semi-retired tax professional. Her primary residence is in Conway, New Hampshire. Every January through April, Jeannine travels to Quincy, Massachusetts, where her tax office is actually located. While she's in Quincy, she stays at extended stay hotels and eats mainly in restaurants. Can she deduct her travel expenses to and from Quincy and her living expenses while in Quincy? Well, in this case, no. Because Jeannine's main income-producing activity is in Quincy, the IRS considers it to be her tax home. Only travel expenses away from your tax home may be deducted from business income. Any expenses for transportation, lodging, and meals that might be considered deductible for business travel, in this case are considered to be ordinary personal expenses by the IRS. But let's change things up a bit. Wendell is a specialty scrub nurse who spent 10 months working as an independent contractor for several medical providers in the Boston area. During the summer, he accepts a 2-month-long contract for a small hospital in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Again, while he was there, he stayed in an extended stay B&B and ate his main meals out. The small hospital did not reimburse Wendell for his expenses. Can he deduct his travel expenses to and from Lebanon and his living expenses while in Lebanon on his Schedule C? Yes. Because the majority of his income-producing activity is in Boston, the IRS considers Boston to be his tax home. Therefore, Wendell would be able to deduct the expenses of traveling to and from Lebanon, as well as the cost of his accommodations and meals in New Hampshire to the extent of the law. But what if there appears to be no tax home? In other words, there's no primary place where income-producing activities take place. In that case, the IRS considers 3 factors for determining if your main home is your tax home. 1. You perform at least part of your income-producing activities at or near your main home. 2. You have expenses for your main home that are necessarily duplicated when you are traveling. Or 3. You regularly stay or have family that live in your main home, regardless of whether you have any income-producing activities there. If any one of these factors apply, your main home is your tax home. If none of these factors apply, the IRS considers you to be an itinerant worker and travel expenses are not deductible at all. Let's look at 2 more examples. This is Dave, a self-employed long-haul truck driver. Although Dave is on the road most of the time, he owns a home in DeKalb, Illinois, where his husband also lives. Let's apply the factors I mentioned before to Dave. Does he perform at least part of his business in or near his main home? No, except in very rare instances when his delivery destination is DeKalb. Does he have expenses for his main home that are necessarily duplicated when traveling? Probably. Although Dave usually stays in his sleeper cab, he does have to purchase meals and stay in hotels when his truck is being repaired. This is in addition to his share of the mortgage and utilities for his main home. Does he regularly stay or have family who lives in his main home? Definitely. Therefore, Dave's main home in DeKalb is also his tax home, and as such, he can deduct expenses for meals, lodging, and incidental personal expenses from his Schedule C income. Now let's look at Alice. Alice is a self-employed urban planning consultant who works with several municipalities on contracts that last from 1 to 3 months each. She stays in short-term accommodations in each city. When she is in between contracts, she either vacations or very occasionally spends a few days with relatives in Biloxi, Mississippi, where she maintains a P.O. box but no permanent residence. Let's apply the factors again. Does she perform at least part of her business in or near to her home? No, since she doesn't appear to have a permanent home. Does she have expenses for her main home that are necessarily duplicated when she is traveling? Again, no. Does she regularly stay or have family that lives in her main home? No. Occasionally staying with relatives and maintaining a P.O. box in a city is not enough to establish Biloxi as her main home. Therefore, Alice is considered to be a true itinerant worker, and as such, none of her lodging or meal expenses are deductible from her Schedule C income. The concept of tax home is essential in determining whether travel is away from home or not, and what travel and transportation expenses can be deducted from Schedule C income. If you'd like to know more, additional resources and information are linked in the video description. In the next video in this series, we will look at what actually constitutes business travel away from home and how it differs from local transportation. So subscribe to the channel to be one of the first to know when that video comes out. Please like the video if you found it informative and share it with anyone else who could find it useful. Your questions, comments, and suggestions are always welcome in the comment space below. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with more of Your Taxes Oversimplified.